When you first step through those sliding glass doors of an international airport, your heart rate naturally elevates to a level that, well, it closely mimics a mild panic attack.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the sheer volume of sensory input just hits you instantly.
Yeah, you have the echoing, overlapping public address announcements, the massive departure boards flipping with hundreds of changing destinations, the physical dodging of people rushing by with their oversized luggage.
It's just a highly engineered, overwhelmingly chaotic
It
environment.
really is. But what if the key to lowering that heart rate and navigating all that chaos isn't a breathing exercise or, I don't know, a prescribed pill, but simply memorizing a 12-line script?
Well, it is a fascinating proposition because most of us assume that when we walk into an airport, we are engaging in these organic, spontaneous interactions.
Right.
But the reality is actually far more rigid. We're essentially stepping into a manufactured environment that operates on a very strict, almost invisible architectural code of communication.
And that invisible architecture is exactly what we are dissecting today. We are doing a deep dive into the language and the hidden logistics of the airport experience.
Yes, and the framework for our discussion today comes from a really interesting place.
Yeah, it's a structured, real-world English conversational guide aimed at intermediate language learners. It follows a traveler named Emma who is heading out on a work trip to London.
Which, I mean, that might sound incredibly basic at first glance. Most of the people listening to this deep dive already know perfectly well how to check a bag or find a gate.
Right, obviously.
But what this language guide inadvertently exposes is how much of our supposed free will and, conversational autonomy in a terminal is completely manufactured by the environment.
Because we aren't really having conversations in an airport, are we? We're just exchanging verbal tokens.
Exactly. By breaking down the vocabulary aimed at a learner, the guide essentially reverse engineers the psychology of travel.
And our mission today is to unpack those tokens. We are going to look at the essential situational phrases and conversational rhythms that, well, turn a high-anxiety environment into a predictable sequence.
Think of this as your psychological survival toolkit for your next international flight.
So let's start with the baseline routine, right? The arrival and that initial wave of cognitive load. In the traveler guide we're looking at today, Emma walks in and immediately needs to orient herself.
She does. She is looking for the check-in counter for her London flight. And what is really interesting is how she initiates contact.
She approaches a staff member, Daniel, right?
Yes, and she uses a highly structured direct inquiry. She says, "Excuse me, could you tell me where the check-in counter for London flights is?"
And Daniel points her towards Zone C just past the information desk and confirms she is flying British Airways. But Emma immediately reveals a bit of that universal traveler anxiety we just talked about.
Oh, the time panic.
Exactly. Her flight is at 6:40, and she admits she's worried she hasn't arrived early enough.
But Daniel gives her a foundational rule of the space. He tells her that international flights generally open their check-in counters 3 hours prior to departure.
That 3-hour rule is like the first piece of structural grounding in her journey. It sets a clear temporal boundary.
It does. But look at what happens next. Emma admits she always gets nervous at airports, and the staff member essentially tells her to, well, stop thinking.
Right. He tells her to just keep her passport and booking confirmation ready in her hand.
Exactly. He is prepping her to transition from a state of anxious free thinking into a state of automated compliance.
It really is like a video game. I couldn't help but compare this entire check-in process to a scripted video game tutorial.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You walk up to the non-player character at the desk, and you don't actually need to converse with them. You just need to select the correct dialogue options from a predetermined menu to advance to the next level.
Yes. The staff member says, "Can I see your passport, please?" And you just select the action to hand over the passport.
And then, "Do you have any bags to check?" You select the response, just this one suitcase.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. And the reason that video game structure exists is to manage cognitive load.
Because your brain is already doing so much, right?
Precisely. When you walk into that terminal, your brain is processing a massive, exhausting amount of sensory data. If you also have to invent spontaneous, creative responses to questions at the check-in desk, your cognitive load just spikes into the red zone.
You feel totally overwhelmed. So standardizing the language protects the brain from overheating.
Exactly. Let's look at the luggage scale moment from the guide. Emma has a small backpack she's keeping as a carry-on and one suitcase to check.
The staff asks her to place the suitcase on the scale. Now, this is a high-tension moment for anyone.
Oh, absolutely. There are financial penalties for getting this wrong.
But Emma doesn't launch into a rambling explanation about how she packed heavy sweaters or how she hopes it isn't too heavy.
No, she deploys a specific verbal token. She asks, is this bag within the weight limit?
And it turns out it is 21 kilos, which is safely under her 23-kilo allowance. She gets her window seat in row 18 and moves on.
A very smooth transaction.
But let me pause you there. If the environment is so rigid, why does she need to ask if the bag is within the limit at all?
What do you mean?
Well, won't the staff just tell her if it's overweight? I mean, is she really lowering her cognitive load, or is she just performing a script to feel like she's participating?
Oh, that is the brilliance of the script.
Yeah.
By proactively asking, is this bag within the weight limit? She is forcing the environment to give her a definitive binary answer, yes or no.
Okay, she is eliminating ambiguity.
Right. Uncertainty is the primary driver of anxiety. By using the exact right terminology, like weight limit, she triggers a standardized response from the staff.
So she doesn't have to parse their tone or guess if they're going to charge her. The script forces a clean transaction.
Exactly. You are downloading the operational code of the airport, so your brain doesn't have to run the uncertainty program in the background. You just execute the routine.
Wow. And you definitely need to conserve that mental energy because the routine is about to be violently disrupted.
Oh, yes. Once you leave the check-in counter, the cognitive load escalates dramatically as you approach the security checkpoint.
And eventually, the departure board. But first, the security line. If the check-in counter is the tutorial level, security is definitely the first boss battle.
The rules are suddenly hyper-rigid.
Yes, the environment is hostile, and the social penalty for getting it wrong feels incredibly severe. You're holding up a line of 200 stressed-out passengers.
The friction here is definitely at its peak. In the conversational roadmap we have here, Emma walks up to security and immediately begins clarifying the rules of engagement.
She asks, "Do I need to take off my shoes?"
And today, she is told no. But she must remove her laptop and liquids.
And here again, we see the power of that hyper-specific vocabulary. She doesn't just pull out her toiletries. She asks, do the liquids need to be in a clear plastic bag?
Right, and the security staff confirms this, adding that universal rule that each container must be under 100 milliliters.
Notice how she isn't arguing with the premise of the rule, though. She is simply verifying the parameters.
She's confirming the boundaries of the maze before she walks through it.
Which she does successfully. She gathers her perfectly measured liquids, finds the departure board, and locates her gate for flight BA-248 to London.
But then the ultimate disruption hits.
Yes, the board updates. Her flight has been delayed.
This is a critical juncture in any travel narrative. It's the sudden, uninvited disruption of the established plan.
In the guide, Emma happens to run into Daniel again near the gate, and she asks him, how long is the delay?
He checks the system and tells her it is a 45-minute wait.
And Emma's reaction is remarkably placid. She essentially says, well, that's not too bad. I might get a coffee while I wait.
And Daniel agrees and just advises her to keep an eye on the screen for gate changes. It is a textbook example of emotional regulation in a stressful environment.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me push back on this pretty hard.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am standing in an airport and someone tells me my flight is delayed, knowing that it is exactly 45 minutes does not calm me down.
Really?
In fact, a specific number usually triggers my brain to start doing frantic math. I start calculating my connection times. I start worrying that 45 minutes is just the gateway to a 3-hour delay, and I just start doom scrolling for alternate flights.
I see what you mean.
So why does knowing the exact number supposedly calm the brain down instead of winding it up? Isn't Emma just an unusually chill character written for a textbook?
It's a completely fair challenge. But that math you start doing in your head, that is actually your brain trying to regain a sense of agency.
Oh, interesting.
Let's look at the neuroscience of what happens during a travel delay. When your plan is suddenly broken, your brain perceives a loss of control. That registers as a threat, which activates the amygdala.
The part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response?
Exactly. You feel panicked because you are suddenly in a vacuum of information.
Right. You are stuck in a terminal, and you have zero power to make the plane fly any faster. You feel completely helpless.
Yes. But when Emma asks a targeted, quantifiable question like, how long is the delay, and receives a factual parameter of 45 minutes, she is forcing her brain to shift gears.
How so?
Processing a specific number requires the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logic, planning, and executive function.
Wait, so the act of asking the question is basically a manual override switch for the brain?
Yes, you are using language to shift from emotional panic to logical planning. The phrase, "Has the flight been delayed?" establishes the reality of the situation. You stop hoping it's a mistake.
And then asking how long is the delay defines the boundaries of the problem.
Exactly. You mentioned the illusion of control earlier. That is a powerful psychological tool.
Yeah.
Emma cannot fix the airplane. But once she has that 45-minute parameter, she regains the illusion of control over her immediate environment.
She can make a concrete executable plan. Go get a coffee, watch the departure screen. I am so fascinated by that. The vocabulary isn't just communicating a question to the staff member. It is framing the problem in a way that forces your own brain to calm down.
You are building a new, temporary routine to replace the one that just got broken.
Which is why mastering these specific phrases is so much more profound than just passing a language test. You are essentially equipping yourself with psychological diffusal tools.
Complete.
Okay, so the 45-minute delay eventually passes. Emma finishes her coffee. Her prefrontal cortex has kept her calm. And now we move into the final and arguably most claustrophobic stage of the journey.
Getting onto the aircraft smoothly.
Exactly. If the terminal is the macro environment, the aircraft cabin is the micro.
We're transitioning from vast echoing spaces into a highly constricted metal tube, and the communication strategies have to shift accordingly.
According to the conversational guide, the gate staff finally announces that rows 15 to 25 are boarding. Emma walks up to the bottleneck of passengers and asks a crucial clarifying question.
Is this the line for boarding?
She presents her boarding pass, the staff confirms her seat is 18A, and she heads down the jet bridge.
And when she crosses the threshold of the aircraft door, the interactions become hyper-specific and intensely spatial.
She gets on the plane and immediately asks the flight attendant, "Could you help me find my seat?"
And the attendant directs her to go straight ahead, turn left, and look on the right side.
Then, as she arrives at row 18, she asks, "May I put my bag in the overhead compartment?"
And the flight attendant confirms she can, and even offers to help if the space is tight.
Let's isolate the phrasing Emma uses in this final stage. "Could you help me find my seat?" And "May I put my bag in the overhead compartment?" From a linguistic perspective, what is the underlying structure of those requests?
Well, they rely heavily on what we call polite modal verbs. Words like could you and may I.
But I have to ask, why the sudden shift in tone? I mean, at the check-in counter, she was very direct. Is this bag within the weight limit?
Right, very transactional.
Now, she is softening everything. Is it really necessary to ask, "May I put my bag in the overhead compartment?" Everyone on the plane knows what the overhead compartment is for. It feels a bit, performative.
Well, it is entirely performative, but it is a necessary performance.
Yeah.
We have to look at the psychology of cramped spaces here.
Okay.
When hundreds of tired, stressed humans are forced into a tight, shared physical space, territorial defensiveness naturally skyrockets. People become fiercely protective of their personal space, their armrests, and their overhead bin space.
It's basically the tragedy of the commons, but with rolling suitcases.
Exactly. If Emma simply walked onto the plane, pointed to the bin and said, "I am putting my bag here," or asked the flight attendant a blunt, direct question like, "Where is seat 18A?" it would be grammatically
You
correct.
can be efficient.
But it would introduce massive social friction. Direct commands or blunt questions in a confined space are often subconsciously perceived as aggressive.
Oh, I see. So the modal verbs, the could you and may I, they aren't really about asking for permission at all. They are linguistic diffusal tactics.
They are spatial de-escalation tools. By framing her actions as polite requests, she is signaling to the flight attendant and to the passengers around her that she is cooperative.
She is acknowledging that the space is shared.
Yes, it is a way of verbally tiptoeing so you don't bump into anyone's heightened stress levels.
And it clearly works. The flight attendant responds with positive reinforcement, confirming she can use the bin and offering immediate assistance. Emma lowers the collective temperature of her immediate vicinity just by structuring her sentences with a softer edge.
It really proves that in international travel, minimizing friction isn't just about packing a lighter suitcase. It is about using language that preemptively puts the people around you at ease.
The phrases act as social lubricants in a machine that is constantly threatening to grind to a halt. So if we step back and look at the entire journey from the curb to seat 18A, we can really clearly see the shape of this survival toolkit we set out to build.
Yes, it's very distinct.
We have the phrases that anchor you during the initial cognitive overload. Where's the check-in counter? Can I see your passport, please? And is this bag within the weight limit?
Then we have the psychological diffusal phrases for when the environment becomes unpredictable and you need to shift out of a panic state. Phrases like, has the flight been delayed? And how long is the delay?
And finally, we have the spatial negotiation tools for when the physical environment shrinks and tensions rise. Is this the line for boarding? Could you help me find my seat? And may I put my bag in the overhead compartment?
For anyone listening, mastering these specific expressions, even if English is your first language and you travel constantly, it's as far more than just ensure you have the right vocabulary.
It gives you a sense of control.
Yes, it provides a structural map. It allows you to anticipate the rhythm of an inherently chaotic space. By memorizing the script, you radically reduce your own cognitive load.
You aren't just reacting to the sensory overload of the airport anymore. You are confidently executing a predetermined operational code. It completely reframes how I think about navigating a terminal. You really don't have to be a seasoned, perfectly relaxed travel expert. You just need to know your cues and your lines for the play.
That's a great way to put it.
Which actually leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up today.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We've spent this time showing how you can distill the overwhelming multi-sensory chaos of a massive international airport down into a predictable, manageable script of just a dozen phrases.
Right.
It makes me wonder what other deeply stressful, seemingly chaotic areas of your life, maybe a tense budget meeting, a difficult negotiation, or even an escalating argument with a partner, might suddenly become perfectly manageable if you just took the time to identify and memorize the underlying script.